So today we're going to talk about the eternal law, which is Aquinas' highest law. It rests in the mind of God and is unchanging in its nature. So I suppose the key idea here for the eternal law is that the law, or the good, the thing that we ought to be aiming for, the perfection of all things, rests in the mind of God. Now, because God is eternal and unchanging, it also is eternal and unchanging. So eternal means goes on forever, and unchanging means doesn't alter. So let's talk a little bit more about what we mean by this law that exists, according to Aquinas. It all rests on our kind of definition here of the word good. And good is a very, very, very tricky thing to define, right? We tend to think of good as the thing you ought to do, the thing that would be best for you to do. It's a value statement. But for Aquinas, good isn't a value statement. Okay, it's not an ought to. It's rather the right kind of adherence to the essence of a thing. So that would be good behavior, and the goodness itself is the correct essence. Let me give you an example. For instance, if I were to kind of draw a square freehand, it would look roughly like that. It's not bad, frankly, though I say it myself, but it's not perfect. It adheres okay to the essence of a triangle, but you can see here I kind of messed it up a little bit and so on. Whereas if I were to use a tool to draw a square, I would draw something that adheres much better, thank you tool, to the essence of a square, right? So this one is greater or better than this one because it adheres better to the essence of the thing. Well, Aquinas thinks that everything is like that. And there is a good, the essence of each thing, and that good ultimately rests in the mind of God. So why does he think this? Well, he produces an argument for the eternal law. Aquinas says, I'm putting it in green so that you can see it's an argument for something, that each law, so each kind of set of rules, let's draw the rules, shall we? Each set of rules is given by a lawmaker. So when you have a set of laws, they don't just kind of pop out of thin air. They're instead written down. So each set of rules is made by well, in Aquinas' time, the people who would make the rules would be kings. So each set of rules, each law, is given ultimately by the king, who decides whether it is a good thing or a bad thing that you do any particular kind of action. Now, these rules are, first of all, in the mind of the king, and then they are written down and communicated to everybody else. But in order for them to be communicated, they need to be, first of all, in the mind of the king. So Aquinas says, well, the ultimate law, so the ultimate law must be given by the ultimate lawgiver. So the ultimate law must be made by the ultimate lawgiver. And that, of course, he thinks, is God. Okay. So that's how we get to the origin of the law being in the mind of God. Let's talk a little bit now about what he means by this law. What are the features of the eternal law? Well, first of all, as we've said, the law is in the mind of God, and of course, God's mind is eternal and unchanging. He actually says it's in his reason, but that's what I think we mean by mind, is reasoning. And if the law, if the mind that it is in is eternal and unchanging, the law is also these things. But what do we mean by the law? What does that actually mean? Well, it's essentially the law, the eternal law, is a kind of hierarchy of essences of good. It's a set of things that, it's a set of ideas in the mind of God of the way the world should be. That's probably the best way of putting it, actually. A set of ideas in God's mind about how things should be. It's not accessible to us, but it's reflected in the natural law, especially when humans try to work out what the essence of any activity is. And by working out the essence, they're working out how God thinks it should be, or, in other words, the eternal law.